Welcome to Draw Process. I'm Ike. I'm drawing page 26 of episode 2 of my comic, First Sun and Sword. And as you see me draw that page, I share my thoughts, techniques, process about my development, as I always do in this series. So let's do it. Spur of the moment, really. Decided the right flow between the Farah, the palace, the gang with the mafia boss guy, and then Sword and Sun with the men that were searching on the streets. We have these different elements, and I want to bring them together. I chose this would be a good point after Sun had shoved the bed into the door, blocking the door. That could be a time where he's somewhat safe in the moment. It could continue with him blocking the door while the men are trying to get in for a little while. A good point to jump to this other scene. So we saw the pigeon get released, and now it is being caught by a servant at the palace, and he runs in to let the magistrate know, and Kurok the man-eater, our big villain for this issue. I knew we were going to have a sequence where all that matters is we see that the pigeon is going into something, into the palace, into the hands of a servant, collecting it, reading the note, running it in to the palace, and showing it to the magistrate and Kurok. So what I'm constructing here is this kind of symmetrical ladder, 2 ladders on the end with one big panel in the middle. And it's going to show in a kind of a montage, in a collection of individual panels, it'll show that happening. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision here as well to go with something a little bit more experimental, inductive. But I thought it'll get the job done. And then on the next page, I have the big reveal of Kurok, because he's been in a seated position and we haven't gotten a good look at his form, just what he looks like exactly. So I'm going to fill the page with him on the next page. And then he'll run out of the palace, off to the black market to get Farah, and that will be the transition point to leave this scene. So what we have here is the pigeon on the left, the pigeon in the man's hands on the right. The note on the left, the man's reaction on the right, and these series of panels that match each other. And then we'll see the magistrate reaction on the left, Kurok on the right. The middle panel, I decided to do something kind of different and wild there too. A fisheye lens, basically, to convey almost like a camera moving from showing slightly from an up high camera angle, but almost like a security camera on a swivel. It's aiming at the man when he's at the doorway where he caught the pigeon, so we can see his back, and then we see the top of his head, and then his back from the other side as he runs across that middle point. So starts to almost turn the image upside down. And by the end of the panel, it is upside down. And it's on a curve like a fisheye lens. So definitely breaking with the grid of perspective, breaking with a really standard way to present, the idea of the man running into the palace. I wondered if I should show a nice establishing shot of the palace again in that large space. I opted not to do it this time. I don't think it's purely necessary to do that. In the next page, we're going to see a decent section of the background of the palace, and I think we will see enough to not need a thorough, full establishing shot of that space. And we've been there in the first scene, and we've seen it. Yeah, this was the idea that came to me, and I don't know if it's the best idea, if it's the best way to show it, but it's interesting. It's something different than I normally do. So I went for it. Like, I want it to be fun for me, interesting for me. Feeling like stretching myself a bit. And just sort of how I'm seeing it in my mind, just to put it down that way. That's the direction I'm trying to go, and so I'm trying to do that here, loosening up. Not only in how I pencil, but how I construct the panels. Yeah. So I'm pretty happy with it. I think it works fine. And I also think it works well because this is a cutaway scene. We're leaving what was a series, at least 3 pages that were very sequential, very step by step, following the character actions. And then we're cutting to a different scene, and this one's feels like this kind of inductive montage thing. And that's, that works because it's a cutaway scene, and then we're going to get back to the beat by beat storytelling that we have with Sun and Sword. My continual studying and improvement with anatomy comes in handy. It has been coming in handy. It has me providing a little more detail just naturally, like by having some greater knowledge of the detail, but also practicing a certain attentiveness to the detail. It has me conveying it in the drawings. Before, as you'll see, even in the first page or 2 or 3 of this book, which at this point would have been, maybe 25 weeks ago, because I've been 24 weeks ago, something like that, because I put out a page a week, basically. But even those first pages, it's based more on shape, language, a little less detail into the anatomy, especially with Lord, I don't know if they call him Lord, Kurok, the man-eater, this lizard with his hulking back and neck, to convey the traps and the collarbone and shoulder construction, to really convey it and let it appear at different angles instead of just kind of like in the most standard flat perspective that makes it easier to draw, conveying it in more complex arrangements that if it fills half a panel, at least you can kind of tell what it is. It feels a little more real, a little more alive when there's some of those details in there. And it feels like the right direction for me because it's moving towards flow. It's flowing with the drawing. It's comfort and drawing from any camera angle, just kind of building what you would see at that angle. So it's almost like my camera, the way I frame these panels, but let's call it a camera. The way I move around my camera in the scene, it used to, especially with, and it still does a bit, but especially when I was worse at anatomy, it used to almost like, you could almost think of it like it would stutter. It would get like jammed and stuck at certain angles. Like it was almost like I couldn't freely move the camera everywhere. I might try to shift it up, but at certain points it would glitch. It would get stuck and skip ahead a few frames or something to an even higher angle. It just couldn't capture certain elements of the anatomy, not just faces, at different angles. And that restriction is something I didn't think about. You're not aware of it, but it's as if that is happening. on an unconscious level, it's like you're skipping certain angles, you're avoiding them. That's not very free expression. That's room for improvement. The way I'm trying to improve in that is not to use reference and incredible care on each page I draw, but to continue to work on improving my anatomy and human figure drawing skills, as well as other things like fabric. But continue to work on those and let them slowly develop in me over time, and focus when I'm drawing pages, focus on the free flowing expression. Almost like when I'm drawing a page is not the best time to try to learn or try to improve. It is the time to perform. And I need to pay attention to my performance when I realize, oh, I'm a little tight there. I'm not very flexible in that spot. I better work on that. And then I include that in my regular weekly practice. Almost like, you're realizing, I don't have enough hip mobility on my left side. I'm gonna stretch more so I can improve that. So it's like that, and that's how it's working for me. It is a continual learning process. This next page that I drew after this one, Kurak, the big reveal of Kurak, he's very large on the page. It's just 2 panels. He's large on the page. Just drew it today. Well, I inked it today, drew it yesterday. And that was challenging to have such a large figure. Usually I have smaller figures where I can abstract more, or there's less detail in the inking. And then it's like, well, how much detail do I put? And he's in a very bright environment, bright background. So do I really cast him in a lot of shadow, and how far do I go with that? And I really want to reveal him. I want you to really get a sense of how he looks. And I'm also doing the character's design for the first time. It's the first time I've ever drawn him in full, like kind of a full view of him. And so as I'm drawing, I'm thinking, okay, what are his proportions? How large? What's the shape of things? Even late in the drawing, I realized that his rib cage is kind of more squashed, like a flattened from front to back. So he's going to be very wide, but kind of narrow on the other dimension. His rib cage, his chest wouldn't stick out as much, but be more flat, and his abdomen and stuff would be flat because his rib cage is flat. So it was a very wide wingspan. His shoulders, the front part of the front third of the shoulders that attaches to the collarbone, would be very strong because he's flat, and he's built for upward and in front of him motion, not so much out to the side and back. So if you think about it, that's the part of the shoulder that would be working the most. So actually thinking about that and constructing his look in this nice, believable way, and giving it some texture, making it gritty, making it detailed. And that is not my typical approach, right? To go more detailed. But that free-flowing and designing as I draw, that is the direction I'm going, is a little more detailed. And yeah, and I'm gonna go with that. I'm gonna go with my gut, with the direction that things are going. So it's becoming more expressive, more detailed in a way. More of these kind of speed lines, I guess you could say. but still like simpler composition. But yeah, that's the direction I'm gonna go, and I think it will be for the best. I think it will make a more expressive comic, and it'll be cartoony, and in some ways maybe less. I don't know, when it's in some ways less heavy blacks. That's gonna feel a little less dark. Yeah. So when you see me pull up my phone during the recording, I'm usually just checking like earlier pages of the comic, maybe, or the script, which is very loose. I try to keep the older pages in a binder next to me, but sometimes I don't have that on hand, and I use my phone. Very rarely, I might pull up a reference if there's something that I'm just not sure on. Even with the body, I have a few good anatomy books on my phone that I've purchased, and I just saved the file into my phone. That's a good quick thing I can pull up and reference if I'm a little confused about the back or the knee or something. And basically I'm looking at just a few angles and positions of those parts in the book and just reminding myself of the structure, but it's never a reference that is in the same position as the drawing. I'm referencing the structure of it. If I do it, and I almost never do it anyways, but if I do, I'm referencing more the structure than than actually getting reference for the drawing, like the particular angle and position. So, yeah, that's a good way to do it, I think. And yeah, I continue the journey. So there is, in some sense, I'm always on a journey to figure out a better way to do it. Something that's, it's like there's growth opportunities. Sometimes there's breakthroughs. But the thought I had today when I went to record this was, in some ways, I know what I need. I know everything I need to know about this process. Like, in some ways, what I'm doing and like what the lifestyle is, what the practices are, the things I should be working on regularly. And things like that they're kind of set in stone. It's like, this is it. I'm doing it. And if I were to do this full time, it would be the same thing. 10 years from now, in some ways, it's the same thing. Now, it'll change in lots of ways. I'm sure it will change, but at the same time, the basic idea, the basics of structuring my life, my practices, and with anatomy or whatever, and it's going to be similar. So that's kind of weird, It's like when you become, I don't know, when you work in an industry and you're finally good at it. You know everything you need to know. Maybe when I was an electrician, that might be a good example. There's still always opportunities to learn, but let's assume it's a similar, it's the same kind of work every time. And you get proficient and you get the idea, and then it's like, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing, until I retire. This is it. And yeah, there's growth opportunities. There's ways to learn, but I know how to learn. So, you've got your sea legs, you got your feet under you, and you're ready to go. But there's something kind of unfulfilling in that. You're sort of like, oh, this is it. Like, this is what the next 20 years looks like, or 50 years or whatever. Guess I'm going to have to stay the course. I'm going to have discipline. I'm just going to have to find contentment and pleasure in this life that I have, because it's not going to magically change in big ways. And that's sort of what I'm finding with the comics, things could change, and my life could change, and this might, maybe it'll make money so that I can do it more often. It could change in a lot of ways. Maybe even the sort of work I'm doing could change, if the right opportunity comes along. But it's still kind of the same. So, the path is the same, and I just got to stay the course, and that's adult life, right? It's not. It doesn't sound very romantic or fun, but I think it's fine. I think it's good, and there can be plenty of joy to be had. Sort of like, there's contentment, there's peace, there's accepting your lot in life. These are good things that can be enjoyable. Finding peace, knowing who you are. These are good things, and it doesn't mean that you're stagnant, that you're not growing. So I know I'm kind of stumbling my way through that topic, but I feel that some. I feel that sense of being at that stage, that place where I need to stay the course. And sometimes this would be the place when I quit a hobby. I might take something up, and then when I realize, okay, I get how this is done, I just have to keep doing this. This is the practice. This is what you do. And then it gets boring. So, or it gets a little more boring and less rewarding in a way. It doesn't mean it's less fulfilling, but it's less rewarding, and it's more close to reality. It's less of a fantasy, because you know what it is. You're not just imagining you're going to win the lottery. You know what you're doing and what the prospects of it are. So you're not in fantasy. You're closer into reality, and that's a good place to be, I think. So I embrace this as a good thing. But I do notice that that's happening. And this is the finished page. So there you go. There's that kind of fisheye lens, camera swiveling down sense of that in that middle panel. And ending it with, the clear close-ups on the magistrate and Kurok and his hissing. That was fun, how that... now that kind of counts as a sound effect, but it is him saying it. So I had mentioned last video, I don't do sound effects. This is his speech, even though it doesn't have a balloon tail. It's, him saying it. But yeah, I thought this is a decent flow. And that's it. I am out of town for the entire week. So I'm going to not be posting a video next Sunday. That'll be the first Sunday I've taken off since I started this thing over a year and a half ago. But because I'm out of town the entire week, I think I'm giving myself that leeway. If I was in town for part of the week, I would have time to do a recording. But I'm going to give myself some slack, enjoy my vacation, and come back hopefully better and stronger and refreshed and revived. So I will see you in 2 weeks after I enjoy myself, and I hope you do the same and continue your journey in your practice.